Hello everyone and welcome to another Sony Creative Software live webinar. I'm Gary Rubholz and today we're going to talk about still images. We're going to take a look at several different ways that you can use still images in your videos. We're going to take a look at several techniques that will bring those still images to life. Instead of just being a static picture, we're going to make movement, we're going to do some special effect kind of things. We're going to touch on a bunch of different tools. We're going to use Vegas Pro in the presentation, but a lot of what I talk about here will also work in Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum, and I'll try to point out where I'm working with something that's a Pro-only feature. Now, a lot of the things that we talk about are things that you might know how to do already, but you might not. And even if you do know how to work with these tools, you may never have thought of working with them in some of the ways that hopefully we'll touch on here today. If you have questions during the presentation, as we normally do, we've got a chat window open on the same page that held the video that you're watching. And you can send a chat question to us at any time. We'll store those up, and at the end of the presentation, we'll take some time to answer as many of those questions as we can. The presentation will be archived for playback later. I'm going to be heading off to Amsterdam for the IBC show basically right after the presentation in the next couple of days, so I don't know if I'll get that presentation up for on-demand viewing quite as quickly as we normally do, but I'll do my best to get that up before I leave town. If not, it might be maybe a couple of weeks before I get that in place. So let's take a look at the computer here, and let's just take a look at what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be exploring, as I said, several different techniques. One of the most basic techniques is the pan scan kind of move that you may have seen when you watched the Ken Burns Civil War documentary, where he had a bunch of still images and he just created motion on those images by zooming into them and moving across from character to character in the picture, or whatever the focal point of the picture was. And I'll show you how to create those moves very simply with the pan scan tools in Vegas Pro and Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum. We're going to animate some generated media, we're going to do some masking, we're going to create a rack focus effect, we're going to isolate some spot color, we're going to do all kinds of different things during the presentation here. So we will take a look at all of these techniques, and probably a few that I've neglected to put on the list here that will come up as I'm talking along. A couple of the tools that we will be using in specific are, as I mentioned, the Event Pan Crop tool. The Bezier masking tools. We're actually going to use the Bezier masking tools a lot, and so if you've never really explored that tool, this will be a great opportunity for you to see how you might be able to use that tool in your project. Now, that is a Vegas Pro only feature, so if you've got Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum, then maybe just sit back and watch and see what you could do if you had the Pro version. We're going to use the keyframe controller area that we've talked about in various webinars in the past, and we're going to use that to create animation and motion and so forth on our videos. We're going to use some filters and effects, some chroma keying tools, and so forth. Another thing that I don't have on my list here that we're going to take a look at is some compositing modes. And again, that's a Pro-only feature, but I'll show you how you might be able to use compositing modes to create different effects in your project. So let's head over to Vegas Pro here. And what I've got is just a project that I've already set up that has several different pieces of media in it that I'm going to use to demonstrate the techniques that we're talking about here today. So the first one that I've got is just that simple pan and scan motion. I'm going to go ahead and play this piece of video, and you'll see that in the video preview window, it's just a still image of basically of a park and a street sign, and then it cuts to another still image of the White House. So pretty static, pretty not very exciting at this point. So our job is to make it a little bit more exciting, make it a little bit more visually interesting. Now, I left if you notice in the video preview window, you see that we've got black bars on the side of the video, and I left those there purposely, because one of the things that you're going to run into frequently, or if not always, with your still images is that the aspect ratio of the still image doesn't match the aspect ratio of your project. And so we need to fix that. It's very easy to do, to fix that, and We can do that right now with these two images. We can fix that with the Event Pan Crop tool. So I'm going to click the Event Pan Crop button for the first image. And in the Event Pan Crop tool here, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it. I'm going to right-click the image and say Match the Output Aspect. And when I do that, it matches the aspect ratio of the position box to the aspect ratio of my project as I've got it set in my project settings. And you can see in the video preview window here that my settings are 1920 1080. So it's a widescreen format. And you notice there are no longer any black bars in the video preview window. So basically that tool just allowed me to crop out some top and bottom and get rid of those bars. I'll do the same thing on the second clip. Here are the bars. Click the Event Pan Crop button, right click, and choose Match Output Aspect. Okay, so that's the first step. Now, one thing that we could do to make this a little bit more interesting is put a crossfade or a transition between the two clips. So if I play from one clip to the other, right now it just switches from one to the other. And of course, we could do anything with still images that we can do with video clips in Vegas Pro. So I just drag the one over the top of the other, and now I have a crossfade. And when I play that, now you see the one fade out while the other one fades in. So that's already a little more interesting just because we've got a transition in place. Again, anything you can do to a video event in Vegas Pro, you can do to a still image event. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about those kinds of specific things, but just keep that in mind. One thing that I didn't mention that I want to step back and talk about just a little bit is that the images that I'm using right now in this project are JPEG images. They came from a camera, from a digital camera. But Vegas Pro and Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum both support a number of different still image formats. So you can use JPEG, Targa, PNG. You can even use a Photoshop file, a PSD file. So whatever you've got, you can basically throw it on the timeline and work with it right away in Vegas Pro. Okay, and I just noticed that for some reason my zoom tools are missing, so I'm not going to really be able to zoom in on things here today like I normally do. So I'll just try my best to make sure you can see everything that I'm doing. So on these clips, as I played these, you see that it's a static image. So let's add some movement to this to make it a little more interesting. So again, I'm going to go to my Event Pan Crop tool. And we've talked in the past about the keyframe controller area down here. And we've talked in previous webinars. So if you're not familiar with this area, I'll show you how to use it, but I'm just going to kind of go over it pretty quickly. If you're still needing some help with that, go back and look at a couple of the older webinars that focus more specifically on the keyframe controller area. But basically what this area enables us to do is to change the parameters of the video that we're looking at, in this case the still image that we're looking at, and create an animation over time. So in this picture, you can see that there's a street sign, and that street sign happens to say 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is a very famous address for the White House in Washington, D.C. So it might be kind of cool, instead of just this static image, to zoom in on that picture, or on that street sign. So I'm going to go ahead and place my cursor in the keyframe controller area down here about 8 seconds into the timeline, and then simply adjust my box, my position box, so that it zooms in on that sign. And you can see in the video preview window exactly what's happening. So now I've got two keyframes, and Vegas is going to do what it normally does and interpolate between the two of them, so that when I play this now, keep your eye on the video preview window up here. When I play this, you see that we now have a nice, even, smooth zoom in on that street sign. Now, how long would that zoom in last? Well, it's going to last for as long as I put space between these two keyframes. So if I want it to go faster, I'll just move the keyframe over a little bit, and now it'll go faster. Okay, so there's one thing you can do to create some interest. I'm going to do the same thing on the other clip, only in this one, go to the Event Pan Crop tool. Let's start out full, maybe halfway through we zoom in. But let's zoom in to the left side of the White House here, and then a few seconds later we'll pan across to the other side of the White House. So now we've got not only a zoom move, but we've also got a panning move. And I'll move this one down just a little bit. And let's take a look in the video preview window and see what we've created. So now instead of that still image sequence that we had, we have a nice zoom in onto the sign. That sets the scene, crossfades to a picture of the White House. It zooms into the left side of the White House, and when it gets there, it pans across the other side. So you can see how you can real easily create some motion on those still images, and that's maybe the most basic tool that you can use for creating, bringing those still images to life. So just go to the pan crop tool, create a couple of keyframes, and do some pan and scan moves. All right. Now the next example I have gets a little more sophisticated than that. And let me just move this down so you can see what I've got. On the top track in this sequence, I've got a picture of this little boy standing by his bicycle. And on the second track, let me solo the second track so you can see it, I've got a picture of the same little boy, now a grown man, on his fancy bicycle. So what might be kind of neat, and in fact this bottom, if I play the project, you can see the top track is just a still image. And if I solo that bottom track, you can see that that's actually a piece of video. So what we thought might be kind of interesting is to have the picture of the boy transform into the picture of the man. Well, you could do a basic crossfade like we did with the two still images that we just used and have it just crossfade from this picture to the video. But what might be more interesting is to just replace just the picture of the boy. So what we're going to do is, again, I'm going to go to the pan crop tool, the event pan crop tool for the picture. And you can see that I've already cropped this down so that the pixel aspect ratio matches, or the aspect ratio of the image matches my video. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask. And this is the Bezier masking tool that I talked about a little earlier that's available in Vegas Pro. And with this tool, you can basically mask out any shape. Now in this case, we have a nice, easy sort of rectangular shape that we want to mask out. But in another example a little bit later, I'll show you how to get a little more sophisticated with the mask. But in this case, all I'm going to do is to drop a corner of the mask in each corner of the inside of the picture frame, and then close my mask. So I'm just clicking and creating a mask. Now in the video preview window, you see that I've masked out everything except for the picture of the little boy, which actually is the opposite of what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do is to mask out everything, to mask out the little boy. So I'm going to change my mode from positive to negative. And now look who's in the picture frame. It's the man riding his bike. And we can get a little more sophisticated with this by using the keyframes. So on the first keyframe, I'm going to set the opacity of the mask to 0 so that you still see the little boy. Then about halfway through, I'll add another keyframe. And then a little bit farther along the line, I'm going to add a third keyframe. And in this keyframe, I'm going to raise the opacity back up to 100. So now you might be able to predict what's going to happen when I play this. It's going to start out with the little boy in the picture, and then it's going to sort of fade out into the grown man riding his bike in the picture frame. So here's what it looks like. And there it fades into the man. So that's a pretty nifty technique to bring this still image to life, knock out a piece of it using the Bezier masking tools, and put something underneath it. So you can see how I have this constructed. I have a full motion video underneath it on the timeline. We knocked out the picture of the little boy, and the man comes in the picture frame. So one more time, it looks like this, still image of the little boy, and it suddenly comes to life with the man riding his bike as an adult. So the Bezier masking tool, we're about to look at the Bezier masking tool and how we can use it in more sophisticated ways. This is a very basic way of nice square-cornered rectangular mask that we can easily create and knock a section out. But what if we wanted to get even a little bit more sophisticated with this? Let's go to my third sequence here. And in this sequence, we've got a still image of Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States of America. And if I play it, sure enough, it's a still image. It's just sitting there. They didn't have video cameras. Well, I don't know if they had them at all in his day, but they certainly weren't widely available. And so all we have is this still image. But we can do a couple of things to bring this still image to life as well. And I'm going to really rely heavily on the Bezier masking tools to show you a pretty cool technique to make this picture sort of pop into 3D and come to life. So let's go get the Bezier masking tools. And remember, a moment ago we just clicked and dragged to make a square mask with the Bezier masking tools. But if you're familiar with Bezier tools in other programs like Illustrator or Photoshop or something like that, you know that you can make far more sophisticated masks than just the square mask that we made a moment ago, or the rectangular mask. And in fact, I can make a mask over basically anything I want to make. So I'm going to show you a technique that I learned from Dave Hill, who used to be the project manager for Vegas way back in the old days, that enables me to take Mr. Lincoln here and pull him out of the picture a little bit. So what I'm going to do is to create a Bezier mask around him, and instead of just creating a square mask, I'm going to click and drag to create a curved mask. And I'm going to do this pretty roughly here for now, but hopefully you can see that with the masking tools that we have here, the Bezier masking tools, we could get pretty sophisticated and very exacting with the mask. So I'm just moving around, creating handles, and adjusting those handles to match the curve of the subject of my picture. Now here, this curve is hard to deal with because it's popping out so much. So I'll just use my split tangent tool to just adjust just that edge of the tangent like so. And I'll just carry on here again. I need to split that tangent and pull it in. If you're not really familiar with the Bezier masking tool, you really should spend some time with it and really get to know how to use it so that you can create these types of masks like I'm creating right now. And basically all I'm doing is I'm dropping points, I'm dragging out so I've got curve handles, and then I'm splitting the tangents so that I can control each side of that curve independently of the other side. And I'm almost through here. Close the mask. And now if you look in the video preview window, you see that pretty quickly I did a halfway adequate job of bringing Mr. Lincoln out of that picture. Well, I didn't really want him to be a floating specter like he appears to be right now. I wanted him to stay in that picture. So what I'm going to do next is to create another copy of that that picture. So I'm just holding down my control key and dragging the event down one track so that now I have him on the other track. I'm going to go to the Event Pan Crop tool for this track, and I'm going to turn off the mask. So now we've got our whole picture again. But if I solo just that top track again, there we've got Mr. Lincoln all on his own. Now, what does that buy me? Why did I do that? Well, now that he's on a separate track that I've used the Bezier masking tools to create him alone on that second track, I can get kind of fancy with him. I can do a couple of things here that you might not have thought of doing before. Since he's alone on that track, I can go to that track's track motion. Let me move this out of the way a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And for starters, I could just turn on a glow. And now I've got a glow around just President Lincoln. I may not want that shocking yellow glow, so I'll just get something maybe just a white or a gray glow. And already, that sort of pops him out of that image a little bit. And I can make that as drastic as I want by making the glow lighter or darker. So he's sort of popped out of that image just by virtue of the fact that I've masked him out with the Bezier tools and put a glow behind just that track. All right, let's take the glow off, and let's see if we can really have some fun with this. I'm going to use the track motion tool again. And what I want to do here is I'm going to sync up my cursor and add a keyframe. Then I'm going to go about halfway through the picture. And let's see, how do I want to do this? I'm going to sync again, add another keyframe at that point, and add a third keyframe at the end. Sync the cursor, and at that last keyframe, I'm going to, oops, I'm in the wrong track here. Sorry, I'm working with the glow. Let me go back up to the position and start that over again. So I want to be on the position track. I've taken the glow off and I'm in the position track. So let me add a keyframe there. Add another keyframe about halfway through. And then a third keyframe at the end. Now on that third keyframe, I'm going to make the box bigger. Then I'm going to go down to my shadow track and turn my shadow, make another keyframe here, and keep the shadow off, and one more shadow keyframe here where I turn the shadow on. And on this first keyframe, I'm going to have the shadow. You can see the shadow already showing up in the picture, but at the first keyframe, I'm going to make the shadow transparent. At the second keyframe, the shadow is fully opaque, as you see here. So now what have I created? Hopefully, if I did everything correctly, what you'll see is the president sort of sitting there until he grows out of the picture with a shadow appearing. All right, now that's pretty cool. So what did we do again here? We took the Bezier masking tool and we masked out the president. Then we added a shadow with the shadow of the track motion, and we created position changes where we grew the president out. Now, why does that work? Well, because this top track is getting bigger, it's obscuring the image of Mr. Lincoln on the second track. We couldn't go the other way where we made it smaller, because then the image, the original image from the bottom track, would start to show through. But as long as we're making it bigger, it just keeps covering the image that's underneath it, and he grows out. Okay, so that's pretty neat. And it's a great way to add some dimension and some life to a portrait picture like this that was just a still image. Okay, here's another use of Bezier masking tools. Here's a nice picture of a little girl that is sitting in not the most engaging setting. It's a nice picture of her, but the setting is kind of, you know, junky in the background, just a bunch of tables and chairs, and you even see some legs in the background. And this was just taken with, you know, sort of a point and shoot digital camera, so everything is pretty well in focus. The depth of field is pretty wide. But what we can do here is use the same sort of Bezier masking technique that we just used and start adding some effects to make this look a little different. So let's go down to where I've got this on the timeline. I'm going to create another copy, hold down my control key and just drag it down, make another copy of the image. So right now I've just got two copies of the same image. Now on the first event, I had already added a Bezier masking tool, and if I turn that on, you can see that I've already masked the little girl out. And since I've turned it on, now if I solo that track, you see there she is sitting alone. Now, just like with the picture of Abraham Lincoln in the previous example, I've broken this picture out and broken it into two separate elements, the little girl and the background. So what can I do? Well, remember the background isn't very engaging, so let me go to the background event here, and I'll close the pan crop tool. I just wanted to show you that I had a Bezier mask already on that. And go to my Video Effects tab, and let's find a Gaussian blur. And I'll take the medium blur preset and drop it on the bottom event. Now you might be able to predict what happens, but watch what happens when I do that. As soon as I do, it blurs out the background. Why does it blur out the background and not the little girl? Because she's on the top track, and a Bezier masking tool has been used to separate her out. So if I solo the bottom track, the girl would be blurred. Right? If I solo the top track, she's in focus. Now again, we could use, on that bottom track, we can use the keyframe controller area to, maybe it starts out totally in focus, but when it gets through a little ways, we change it to medium blur, and now we've got a rack focus kind of effect that starts in focus and goes out of focus. Okay, let me take that first keyframe off so that it's just always in focus. Another thing that you could do here, another kind of cool little trick that really is very easy to do once you've done this, is I could trim that top track down, or maybe trim it down a little bit, and then add a fade in. So now what's going to happen is the whole thing is blurred, but as we get to the fade in of the little girl, she's going to come into focus. So very cool kind of pseudo rack focus effect that you can easily create by adding the Bezier masking tool, putting another event underneath it, and just using some of the techniques that enable you to blur things or move things and so forth. So hopefully you're getting the idea that a couple of tools and a couple of techniques are kind of consistently coming into play here. Excuse me. Sorry. Whitney, can you mute my mic for just a second? All right, sorry about that. The Bezier masking tool we're making a lot of use here. We're also making a lot of use of the idea of putting the same clip below the first clip on the next track down. And that gives you the ability to do things to the first clip or the second clip that don't affect the first one. All right, so, okay, let's take a look at a very common technique, which is the chroma keying technique. And what we're going to do here is, you can see the top track has this woman standing in front of a blue screen. And if I mute that, the bottom track is just a still image of a hallway. And let me play it, and you can see, yep, it's just a still image of a hallway. So our job is to take that still image and make it come to life by putting the woman into the hallway. And if I play the project with the woman in it, you can see that she's standing there, and then she starts moving and walking towards the camera. So our job is to put her in that hallway and have her walk toward the camera down the hallway. Well, obviously we have a couple of issues here. For one thing, the camera was sideways when we shot this, so she's standing sideways, which obviously is not going to do. So let's go to the track motion dialog box here and change the angle to 90 degrees. That puts her upright. Make it a little smaller so that she's looking like she's standing in the hallway. And now we just need to get rid of the blue screen around her. Now we have a little bit of a problem here because she happens to be wearing blue jeans. So if we try to key out the blue screen, we're going to probably start keying out her blue jeans as well. So we have to play another little trick on the video to make sure that we get this the way we want it. And we talked about in last month's webinar, if you had a chance to be with us, we talked about color correction, and we talked a lot about the secondary color corrector where we could choose a spot color and change it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the color of her pants so that when I key out the blue of the blue screen, her pants don't go away as well, and she would just be a legless specter floating down the hallway. So what we're going to do is to first go get the secondary color corrector, and I'll drop it on that top track. And I'm going to go back to my track motion tool and make that a little bit bigger just so you can see what I'm doing a little more effectively, since my zoom tools aren't working today. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because I spent a lot of time with this last month in the webinar, so you should take a look at how this works. But I'm just sampling the jeans on her on the video, sampling her jeans, and let's take a look at the mask. And you can see that I've done a pretty good job of getting the mask. There are some holes in my mask, so I'll just tweak this a little bit to try to widen this out a little bit and see if we can make, there we go. Now you can see we've got a few artifacts around the outside, but in this case I don't really think that's going to matter too much. So I could just move this around until I'm happy that I've got a pretty good mask on her jeans. And again, if I had more time, I would spend more time to do it right. But now that I've got that mask, I can use my color wheel to change the color of her jeans, change them whatever I want. So let's say we want to give her green jeans. Okay, something far enough away from the blue of the blue screen that it's not going to get in the way when we use our chroma key tool. Okay, we can, let's just close this for a moment. Now let's get, from my video effects tab here, let's find our chroma key here and drop it onto the clip. Okay, you can see that it's already taken effect, but I'm going to turn it off first, and this is kind of an important trick when you're using the chroma key filter. It wants to start working right away with the default color. Well, that default color isn't quite right for this piece of video, so I'm going to turn it off. That enables me to then sample it, and let's try to get a sample that has some dark as well as light hues to it. And now if I show the mask, I can turn the chroma key back on and show the mask. Now I can come in here and start adjusting, and what I'm trying to do is to get this so that we see nothing but the white of our subject of our video standing in the hallway there. Okay, so that's close enough for you to get the idea. And here we have her in the hallway. Okay, so let's go back to the track motion tool and make her a little smaller. Okay, you can see that I've got some artifacting down here. I'd spend more time to make that right, but here she is standing in the hallway. It looks like she's placed pretty well. If I come back down to my timeline here and move that out of the way and play the project, you see her walking down the hallway. So there we go. We've made a still image of a hallway. We've made it into a piece of video that has motion in it. Now, nothing else in that hallway would naturally move, so this looks perfectly natural with her walking down the hallway, just like in Hollywood. So there we go. If that was the hallway of doom on the movie, then she'd be perfectly safe as my actress, and she'd be walking down the hallway of doom with no potential of getting hurt. All right. Okay, let's take a look at the next sample. And this is just a piece of media. It's not a piece of media. It's a still image of a background, and it might be a cool background that you might want to use for like an interview shot, or whatever it is that you want to use it for. But if I play it, you'll see that it's just a still image, and it's not very engaging as a still image. Maybe you want to make it a little more exciting. Well, let's use a couple of techniques to spruce this up a little bit. The first thing I could do to it is just very simply go to my video effects and choose something that will alter it over time. So let's say I'm going to use my pinch punch, and I'm going to drop a maximum punch on this. As soon as I do, you can see that it pops out. I can move the target of the punch, and of course I can use my keyframe controller area to animate this. So I'm going to move it up to the left, from the left to the right. And so now I've just put a moving effect on this that sort of animates it and gives it some motion. Okay? So that's a very simple thing that you can do with any still image and any of the effects. You might put a swirl or a wave filter on there or something. If you ever wondered why you would use something like punch pinch or the wave filter or the swirl, well, here's a good example of why you might want to use something like those tools. You might want to be a little more subtle than what I've done here, but you get the idea that I can do it. Now, let's say we did want to be more subtle. Well, again, I can take a copy of this clip, of this event, and drop it below it on the timeline. I'll go to the event window for that one and remove the punch. So now if we place this here, you can see that the top one has the punch, and if I solo the bottom one, it doesn't. Well, what does that buy me? Well, what I can do now is drop the opacity of that top clip so that the punch becomes less prominent, but it's still there. So here I am at 20%, and if I play this, now you can just sort of subtly see some motion going on in there. And I don't know how well that's coming across over the feed, the webinar feed, so I'm going to raise that up to about 50%, and hopefully you'll see it a little bit better. But here it is, just sort of a little bit more subtle than when you had the opacity at 100%. So you can put, again, stacking two on top of each other, drop the opacity of the first one, and then just make something a little bit more subtle than what you had before. Okay, let's get even more sophisticated about this. I'm going to take that punch off of there. So once again, it's just a still image. And what I'm going to do now is to use my compositing modes to create yet another effect. Now, compositing modes is a feature in Vegas Pro. It's not available in Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum, but it's a feature in Vegas Pro that holds a lot of power, but is also either misunderstood or completely not understood at all by many users. I actually wrote a newsletter article that appeared in our Sony Creative Software newsletter a few months back and created a video that's available in the video section of our training zone at sonycreativesoftware.com/training that goes into quite a bit of detail on how the compositing tools work. So I'm not going to really talk about it here. I'm just going to use it and show you some of the possibilities, and then maybe you'll want to go back and view that video or read that article so that you can get a handle on how these compositing modes work. By default, the default composite mode is source alpha. And that just means if there's an alpha channel, in other words, transparency in the top track, it'll show through to whatever's on the bottom track. But I can change that in Vegas Pro to a number of different things. And I'm going to choose Dodge, which basically is a way of making the composite brighter. It has the effect of kind of combining the colors of the two clips to make everything brighter. And now we're combining the same clip with itself. So we put Dodge, and you see that right away it got a little brighter. Okay, so that doesn't really buy us much, but now that we have that composite mode set to Dodge, we can right-click the track icon here, choose Insert Remove Envelope, and add a composite level envelope. Now with this composite level envelope, we can bring the top track in and out. And so I'm going to set it at 0, so there's no compositing going on at the beginning, but then I'm going to add a few points. I'm just double-clicking the composite line to add a couple of points to it. And I'm going to bring that composite level up and down over time. All right, so what does that do? Let's play through this, and you'll see what it does. When I play it, the composite that made it look brighter, because I've set it to, what did I set it to over here? I set it to Dodge. That composite is going to fade in and out, and watch what happens. Sort of brings sort of a pulsating light look to the background. Okay, so just by changing my composite mode and adding a composite envelope and bringing that composite mode in and out, I've created an image that's no longer just static. Okay, now that's not all we can do, of course. We don't have to composite the same clip with itself. We can take something else, like let's say a media generator, and even just something as simple as this green solid color media generator. Let me drop that into place as a take. And now let's see what happens when we play through that. Now we're getting a different color moving in there. Now it's kind of goofed up because of the aspect ratio here, so let me just restore this so it's full aspect ratio and play that again. And what you should see is some green light sort of pulsing through that background. Okay, another thing we could do is to drop a completely different piece of either video or another still image in there. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me go to my Explorer window, and I'll go to my backgrounds, and let's drop this neon flower into place. Add it as a take. I'm going to go check my composite mode, match that to my cropping, match that to the output aspect ratio. In fact, I'm going to make this smaller. Okay, now let's play it and see what we get. So now we've got a different kind of pattern coming in with the light. But another neat thing we could do here is use the keyframe controller area to create a little bit of motion in here. So let's say I'm going to put that there. At the end, I'll put it up here, and I'll spin it a little bit. And let's see what we've created. So I've just created an animation, and if I play through this, Let's play it. Now you've got all kinds of light flashing in and out and some motion in the background. So we've taken two still images, we've composited them using a different composite mode than the default source alpha mode, and combined that with my event pan crop, my keyframe controller area to create some motion and some rotation, and we end up with a background that's no longer just static. It's something that moves and adds interest to our video. Okay. I've only got a couple minutes left here before I want to get to the question and answer portion. So I'm going to sort of skip the last demo that I had, but I do want to show you two or three preferences that come in handy when you're working with still images. Let me go to my animals folder up here in my Explorer window, and I'll just drop one of these into my timeline. And you see that, whoops, let's take this down to a different track that doesn't have the composite mode on it. So you can see that, again, the aspect ratio of the image doesn't match the aspect ratio of my project. And you saw earlier that I could go into the event pan crop window, right-click, and choose Match Output Aspect. Well, that's fine, and it works great. But what if you have, you know, 30 pictures or 40 pictures or 100 pictures that you need to add to your project? It could get to be, you know, time-consuming and laborious to go through each one of those images and do that manually as I just did. So what we can do is go to the Preferences dialog box, so Options, Preferences, and on the Editing tab, the very bottom here is Automatically Crop Still Images Added to the Timeline. If I select that and turn it on, say OK, now when I bring another one of these clips down to the timeline and place my cursor there, you see that it's already been cropped so that it fills the whole video preview window. And if I check my event pan crop, you can see, yep, that's been cropped down quite a bit because this was a tall picture, tall and narrow picture. It cropped it way down so that it would fit into my preview window, okay, without the black bars. So that's a great tool to have on. Another preference that is handy to have enables you to add a bunch of still images of the same length, of a specified length, and if you want to, overlap them so that you have a series of crossfades and so forth. So again, under Options, Preferences on the Editing tab, the new still image length preference is set by default to 5 seconds. Let's say we want it to be something shorter. Let's say we want 3 seconds. We can just change it there. And we can say automatically overlap multiple selected media when added. So I'm going to select that checkbox, and it gives me some choices about how I want to overlap them. I'm just going to leave those at the default and say OK. Now when I select all of these pictures and put them down on my timeline, you can see as I play through this that they've all been cropped properly, and there's a crossfade between each one of them, and they all last for 3 seconds. So if you're working with a lot of still images and you know you want them all cropped, and maybe you know you want a crossfade between all of them or something like that, you can easily go ahead and add that. If you want, add that using the preferences that we just changed. If you want something other than a crossfade, I'm going to click the first event to select it, hold down my Shift key, click the last event to select that, and I'll go up to my transitions, and I can add any transition I want. So if I wanted, let's say, maybe this page peel, I could drop that on any one of the transitions. Since I have that whole sequence selected, it's going to apply it to all. There's a page peel between the first one, second one, so it applies it to all of them. Another neat trick is to use, instead of this page peel transition, let's use the gradient wipe transition. And here we can use all different kinds of artwork to create custom transitions. So let me add just this one and play through it so you see what it looks like. Kind of paint splat transition that brings the other clip up. But the neat thing about this is I can use the Browse button to go to my desktop and find my files, and I'm going to use, let's say, this tiger as the artwork that gets used in that transition. And what I'm going to do is to save this as a preset. So I'll just say tiger, save it. I'm going to choose a different preset and then go back to my tiger preset. And actually, I'm going to just delete that, select all of these, and then come back over here and see if I can find my tiger preset. If I did this right, we should be able to see it in the box somewhere here. There it is at the very bottom. And take that tiger preset and drop it into place. So now when we play through this, we see the image of the tiger sort of come into place as the pictures transition from one to the other. So there's another little trick you can use to bring still images to life, using them in a transition, in a gradient wipe transition capacity. All right, so, okay, we're over time to get to the Q&A, so let me go back to my PowerPoint here just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay, right, so we have several different training resources available for you. I've mentioned a couple of them during the course of this presentation already. One of the most innovative ones is the built-in interactive tutorials that are available both in Vegas Pro and Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum that'll walk you through various operations in the application, so it's a great place to start. We have the seminar series training DVDs that give you step-by-step instruction and also the files that the instructor uses so that you can follow right along with what we're doing and learn the new features of Vegas Pro 10. I mentioned the free training videos and the monthly newsletters that we have available at sonycreativesoftware.com/training. You see the URL at the bottom here. We also archive all of our webinars, and I mentioned earlier that we would be archiving this webinar so you can view it for on-demand playback later. Might take us a couple weeks to get that one up there, but we'll get it there as soon as we can. So if you don't know how to use the spot color, the secondary color correction tool that I showed, you can go to last month's webinar. If you don't know how to use keyframings, there's training for that up there. If you don't know about composite modes, I mentioned the training video and the newsletter article that cover compositing. So take a look at those free training resources that are at sonycreativesoftware.com/training, and you can really get up to speed on a lot of the techniques that we used here today. We do have a promotion going for the webinar, and in fact this one we're letting run for quite a while, for the whole month of September, between now and September 30th, 2011. You can save $50 on the Imagination Studio 3 package. It's $124.95 price. And in that you get Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum 11, DVD Architect 5, SoundForge, Acid Musics, and the rest of the things that we have listed here. So that's a great value, over $100 off what you would normally pay for each of those separately. So if you're looking to get into some of these tools and you don't know if you should really spring for the Pro version just yet, the Imagination Studio is a great way to get into all of our software. And again, that promotion expires on the 30th of September. All right, so that's the presentation. Let's take the 10 minutes or so that we have left and address some questions. Whitney, I'm assuming we have some questions over there. Make sure your mic is unmuted there. Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we got a few questions, the same ones over and over again, it seemed. The first one is, how can you limit can you limit the pan scan movement to just horizontal or just vertical?
That's a good question. Yeah, you can limit it. So let me switch back to my computer here and get back to Vegas Pro. And let's see, I'll just use one of these pictures of the animals that we brought up here. So maybe we want to zoom in on this tiger. Let me just move it off a little bit. So right now it's just a still image of the tiger, and maybe we want to zoom in a little bit on that picture. Go back to my pan crop tools, and let's say we zoomed in quite closely, and the question is, what if I wanted to take this box and just pan straight across his face and not have any worry that I'm going to go up and down and accidentally add some vertical motion as well as the horizontal motion that I'm after? And you can do that real easily. There's a little button over here called the Move Freely button right now because, as you can see, the arrows point in all 4 directions, and I can move this box in any direction I want to. If I click that button, it toggles to a Move in X only state, and here I can't, no matter how I try, I can't move that box up or down. I can only move it back and forth, and this would be what I want to use to pan across the tiger's face. And if I click it again, now I've restricted the movement to Y only, and no matter how hard I try, I can't go right and left. So only up and down. And if I click it a third time, I get back to the Move Freely state where I can do anything I want. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to just use the numbers over here. So if I wanted to move it over, I could just use the slider or type in a number or use the tools over here. So a couple of different ways that you can restrict that. And as long as that question was asked about the pan crop, I'll point out that in track motion, you've got very similar tools where I can lock movement in X, so now I can only go up and down, or lock movement in Y, can only go back and forth. And again, I could just use the numbers over here to do the same thing. Okay?
Great. Second question is, what's the best still image file format to use in Vegas, and why?
The still image format that I would consider the best is PNG. And the reason I like PNG is because, well, there are a couple of different reasons. First of all, it's not as highly compressed as some of the other formats like JPEG, but it also supports an alpha channel. So if I have a PNG file that I've created in an image editing application like Photoshop or whatever, and I've added a transparent layer or transparent background to that image, that PNG file will bring that transparent layer over to Vegas Pro, and Vegas Pro will recognize it, and I'll be able to composite it just by dropping it into the timeline and dropping something else underneath it. JPEG files don't support that transparency, so that's one big reason why I prefer the PNG files.
Okay. In your recommendation, is there anything you can do to overcome pixelation when you zoom into still images?
Yeah, that's a real good question too, and I want to go back to the computer for that. The question is, basically when I zoom into something far enough, and I'll change this to best full so maybe we can see it. If I zoom in far enough on this thing, eventually I'm going to start getting pixelated look where it just doesn't look clear. And the question is there any way to overcome that? The answer is basically avoid it. Shoot your still images at the highest resolution possible. The higher resolution you shoot your still images, the more resolution you have to play with here in Vegas Pro as you zoom in. But even on the highest resolution pictures, eventually you're going to get to a point where you're going to start pixelating. Now Vegas Pro supports gigapixel pictures, so even super high resolution images you can bring into your timeline. Imagine a super high resolution image of the galaxy or something, or space. You can zoom way in on that, but even still, eventually, if you zoom too far, you're going to start getting pixelization. And once you get the pixelization, you might be able to play around a little bit with a sharpen filter or something like that, but you're really not going to be happy with the results. So the real answer to that question is just make sure you don't zoom in so far that you start pixelating in the first place.
Great. We got this question a few times today. Can you take a video frame and turn it into a still image in Vegas?
Yeah, yes you can. A couple of different ways you can do that. Let's see, let me get back to a place in my project here where I actually had a piece of video. We had a picture of a guy riding his bike. Here we go. So the question is, if I solo this, the question is, how do I take this guy and make it a still image? Well, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. Maybe the easiest way in Vegas Pro, this is not available in Vegas Movie Studio, is to right-click the event, choose Insert Remove Envelope, and add a velocity envelope. That velocity envelope enables me to create fast motion, slow motion. If I add some points to this, you can see that I can create fast motion, slow motion, reverse motion, and so forth with this velocity envelope. But if I undo all that and simply right-click the first point and say Set To, and set that to 0, I now have a still image of that bike rider. Now that's great if that first one happens to be the still image that you want. If it isn't what you want as a still image, you could do some trimming and various moving of the envelope around to get what you want. But another way that you can do it, let me remove that envelope, remove the velocity envelope. Another way that you can get any frame in your video as a still image is to park your cursor on the frame you want, and then in the video preview window, just above the video preview window, you have a couple of little buttons up here. The first one copies a snapshot of that frame to the clipboard. And there are various reasons you might want to do that. Maybe I want to take that frame and drop it into my image editing application and do some image editing with it. I could copy to the clipboard, open my image editor, and paste it in that way. If I want to make a file out of this image, I can just say save snapshot to file, click that. It says where do you want to save it. Let me make this a little bit smaller so you can see everything. It gives me the choice of a JPEG or a PNG file. I mentioned earlier that I prefer PNG files, so I'm going to choose that. And save. Now when I go back to my Explorer window, I put that in the Animals folder. Let's refresh it. Refresh that folder. Oops, sorry. Refresh that folder so that we can see it. And there's my image, which if I play in my trimmer window, you see is the still image that I created. So basically, drop your cursor, click the Save Snapshot to File button, and save it where you want it. You now have a still image of that frame.
When you import photos, standard def or high def, do you leave it square or do you match it to your project properties? I think he's asking.
Yeah, as I did most often in this presentation, I usually match it to my aspect ratio. Because if I don't, let's restore this. If I don't, then I get the black bars. And I prefer usually to have it fill the screen. Now, a case where that might not be the case is, let's go back to another still image. Let's go back to this image of President Lincoln over here. There's a background in this, and here's a case where I did not match my aspect ratio of the image because I wanted the whole thing, and to mask the fact that there would have been black bars, I added a noise generator. And I can mute that noise generator so that you can see what it looks like. Let me go back to preview auto so we have a little bit better response time. And so there are the black bars. So there's a case where I don't want to match my aspect ratio. And there may be other cases like that in your projects that you want to leave it. So sometimes I do, most of the time I guess I do, sometimes I don't. Looking at the generated media behind this picture kind of gets me off track of the questions, but it reminds me of something that I wanted to show you earlier. If I play this, you can see that the still image in the background is just a still image. It's just generated media and it just sits there. Another thing I can do to add some life to this is to animate that noise texture a little bit. So if I click my animation button, add another keyframe, and then just maybe change the progress in degrees a little bit. If I did that right, and I did it very quickly, so hopefully I did, but if I did it right, I did it right, I just didn't do enough that you can really see it. So let me just make it really drastic so that you can see it. So now I've added some motion to that background. So there's another way of taking a still image, which in this case was generated media, and adding some motion to it. All right, it's top of the hour, so I think that's about all we have time for. Appreciate you tuning in to the webinar today. I hope you learned a few things about not just still images. Keep in mind that everything we did here today, you could basically do with a piece of video as well. So the techniques we used brought life to still images, but it could also be used, for instance, like the compositing trick that we used, you could use that with motion video and get all kinds of interesting effects that you might not have thought of before. So I appreciate you tuning in. Let's just pop back to the computer screen real quickly, take one more look at the PowerPoint, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Nope, that's it. So thanks for being with us. We'll have this presentation up again as I said, within 2 weeks, I would think. And we'll put it up on the SonyCreativeSoftware.com/training. So take a look there in a couple weeks, and take a look there for all the other stuff that we have up for you. So for today, thanks to everybody for joining me. If you happen to be in Amsterdam for the IBC show next week, stop by the Sony booth. I'll be there. Be happy to say hi, introduce yourself. I love to meet people who've been with us at the webinars and so forth. So stop by the booth and say hi. And then in the meantime, we'll see you next month for another live webinar. So long.